Welcome to our second lesson on sentences. In our first lesson, we talked about simple sentences, that is, those sentences that just contain an independent clause. So you've got a subject and then a verb, and usually an object, but it needs to have a subject and that one main verb. If we add to that independent clause one or more dependent clause, then we get the type of sentence we're talking about today, and that is complex sentences. So if we add one or more dependent clauses to a simple sentence, it becomes what we call a complex sentence. It's more complex. To remind you, a dependent clause is the type of clause that depends on the main clause for it to make sense. So it's those clauses that cannot stand alone. They are dependent on the main clause to make sense, and they usually add information to our sentence. So let's take you through where you can find these dependent clauses within a complex sentence. You can find them firstly at the end of sentences. So if we look at this example here, it says Lucy changed her clothes because it was hot. Now, Lucy changed her clothes can stand alone. It is an independent clause. But because it was hot doesn't make sense by itself. It's a dependent clause. It depends on the beginning of this sentence to make sense. So in this case, the dependent clause has come at the end of our complex sentence. Dependent clauses in a complex sentence can also come at the start of sentences. So if we look at this second example, it says, until he watched the video, Sam couldn't structure sentences correctly. Now, if we were to just have Sam couldn't structure sentences correctly, that could stand alone as its own sentence. It is an independent clause. But the first bit, until he watched the video, leaves us hanging, leaves us needing more information. It needs more information to make sense, and we get that information in the main clause or the independent clause. So this bit here, until he watched the video, is a dependent clause within this complex sentence. I've got one more complex sentence over here that reads, Annabelle, feeling scared, jumped up. And this is to show that the dependent clause can actually come in the middle of the sentence. So if you look closely at this, if we were to take out the information that is in between these two commas here, we would have an independent clause that would make sense by itself. It would read, Annabelle jumped up. A short, simple sentence with a subject and a verb. So this bit, feeling scared, can't stand on its own. That's not a complete independent clause or sentence, feeling scared. It depends on the information in the main clause, in the independent clause, to make sense. So this bit here is an independent clause, but this bit here, this is our dependent clause, and we know that it is a complex sentence because it has an independent clause with at least one dependent clause. And that is the definition of a complex sentence.